Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TBR's Devices webinar, End of the Beginning, which will walk you through the results of the Devices benchmark. I'm Allison Crawford, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. In the next 45 minutes, Analyst Jack Narcotta and Executive Analyst Ezra Gottheil are going to delve into the trends featured in the computing benchmark to which you subscribe, followed by Q&A of these trends and how they're going to affect you. But before Jack and Ezra get started, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we're recording today's session and we'll be posting it to our YouTube site, TBR channel. We encourage you to visit this channel to watch this presentation or any of the others that we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions on the materials we're presenting. To the right of your screen, you'll see the Q&A and chat function. Please send any questions through the Q&A or chat function, and Jack and Ezra will address them at the end of the presentation. Third, we're going to send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of today's presentation. You can also find slides, webinar decks, and commentaries on our SlideShare channel at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. And with that, let me introduce Jack Narcotta and Ezra Gottheil. Jack has more than 15 years in the IT industry, which ranges from the early days of Ethernet to telecommunications to the current revolution in mobile technology. Change the slide. As an analyst in TBR's computing practice, Jack is primarily responsible for reporting on hardware vendors such as Motorola, Nokia, Samsung, and Sony, as well as focusing on trends and opportunities within Chrome, Android, and the iOS ecosystems. Ezra leads our coverage of HP hardware, Lenovo, and Apple, and is the principal researcher on projects including consumer and business tablets, PC warranties, PC supply chains, mobile device strategies, mobile device management, app stores, and social networking. He's been covering the computing industry for over 20 years, and his insight has proven invaluable to our hardware clients. And with that, let me hand this over to Ezra.
Thank you, Allison, and good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to scroll it back once to refer to the title. End of the Beginning is a Winston Churchill quote. In 1942, after the first major success of the Allies in North Africa, Churchill gave a talk where he said that this is not the end, this is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. The devices industry has been in a period of high disruption, basically ever since the iPhone shipped in 2007, where the functions that people were doing was shifted away from, in many cases, shifted away from the core device, the PC, first to smartphones and then to tablets. Now, that period of disruption is not ending, but it's becoming a good deal more moderate, and therefore I've said this is the end of the beginning. Disruption will continue, but at a slower pace, and we can begin to see the picture as it is emerging. So I'll be speaking about an overview of the devices landscape, then about PCs, then about smartphones, and then about tablets, and occasionally touching on other topics. We'll be talking about the vendors, and we'll be talking about the devices. So right now, we believe that the PC slide is tapering off. There are a number of reasons for that. We believe that starting with this coming or current fourth quarter of 13 and going forward through 2014, we will see a flattening off of what has been a very steep decline in PC sales. We believe also that smartphones are showing definite maturation. They will continue to grow rapidly, but not as rapidly as they had been growing. And what we're seeing emerge is two or three very distinct types of tablets. If you look at the charts from our benchmark down at the bottom, you can see that the lion's share, especially of the profit, is in smartphones at this point. However, that is concentrated in two companies, in Apple and Samsung. You can see the diminution of the profit contribution of PCs, but PCs are still the second largest profit category and very much the second largest revenue category. And for all the explosive growth of tablets, you can see the tablets is still a relatively small part of the financial picture having to do with devices. So let's talk about PCs. As I said, I believe we believe that we are moving into a phase shift, moving from a phase of extremely rapid decrease in PC sales and PC revenues to a period of stabilization, not a bounce, not a recovery to a period of growth, but either slow decline or slow growth depending on the global economy and on innovations in the PC space. As this is being driven by the lengthening PC cycle, where people are keeping their PCs longer, and since this is beginning to stabilize, we're seeing stability. As this is happening, the vendors are adapting themselves to the new situation, finding a strategy to live with what is no longer a growing business. Further out, we see another period of instability driven by lightweight keyboard devices like the Chromebook. So let's talk about the PCs and what we see happening over the next year or so. We have a new life cycle. It's probably on the order of a year longer. People are keeping their PCs longer for a number of reasons. They last longer. The older ones do the job adequately, and they have some of their device budget is being devoted to other devices. Also, PCs are no longer being called upon to do the things that other devices, especially tablets, do better than them. It doesn't mean PCs are no longer essential, quite the contrary. There are more things PCs can do that tablets can't than vice versa. PCs will continue to be necessary for a lot of functions, a lot of tasks that we call worky. That is to say, like things you do at work. That may be something you do at home. It might be writing, it might be planning or budgeting or spreadsheeting or photo editing, but they're more intensive, worky kinds of tasks. Tablets have different specializations. Another reason that we see some stabilization and an end of the decline in PC markets and PC sales is that Windows 8.1 is an improvement on Windows 8.0. In part, it's a 0.1 release where traditionally lots of more conservative buyers finally move into an operating system upgrade. It has partially solved the problem of the very pronounced shifts between the two PC environments embedded in Windows 8. And there are some definite improvements that are now being more effectively communicated. So I think there's less resistance to Windows 8.1 than there was to Windows 8.0. This doesn't mean that it's going to be a wonderfully wildly popular, widely acclaimed operating system. We believe that Microsoft did an impressive job in uniting a tablet interface with a standard PC interface, but it's still very disruptive, and the benefits to those who don't have a touchscreen are still not as clear. Another thing that's happened is that the PCs are evolving and differentiating more than they have for a while as vendors deal with the decline in PC sales by aggressively investing in design and R&D. So we see more touchscreens, more varied form factors, longer battery life, thinner and lighter, and a decrease in prices for some of these attractive features. One aspect of that is the two-in-ones, the Windows 8 devices that are both tablets and PCs, and they are fully fledged PCs and fully fledged tablets. So they solve a problem for a significant part of the user base. All of these things will drive not so much a recovery as an end to the decreases in PC sales. Let's look at the vendors. Lenovo has been the growth leader, even though its growth in the most recent quarter was very small against the total PC market. It has gained share with great consistency. Lenovo does this in part because it has always tolerated lower margins than most of the competition, in part because it's very aggressive about experimenting with new designs and form factors, and it reinforces the successful ones and withdraws the less successful ones, and in part because it is able to make decisions rapidly and move on to the next step. Just a second. Damn. HP has adopted a strategy of preserving its its margins and its profits on the PC and tolerating some decrease in its market share. That seems to be an accommodation they've made. They've tightened up their organization and reduced some of their costs, and the decline in margins seems to have bottomed out, but they are losing share. They still are the second largest PC vendor, and there's room for them to continue to do this. They are much more experimental and innovative than they have been in the past, but the more experimental companies, the Asuses of the world, have accelerated their degree of experimentation, so HP is still not as wild and crazy as the Asuses. Dell has switched its strategy. At one point, it was allowing itself to have a decreasing share of the PC market as it attempted to preserve its margins, but its share would decline so rapidly that it's accepting lower margins in order to maintain a share. It has come to the conclusion that continuing with significant PC sales, including in the consumer market, is important to its strategic purpose of moving into a solutions-oriented approach. Asus has benefited from its relationship with Google. It's probably the most experimental of the vendors, and it's coming up with all kinds of designs that it thinks one of which it thinks will give it the kind of breakthrough success it's had in the past with things like the netbook. Acer is in trouble. It has very low reserves. It is investing in R&D and investing in experimental design, hoping for a hit that saves it from decreasing share, negative margins, and very little left in its tank. But it's trying a high-risk strategy, which is the appropriate thing to do when otherwise you're in difficulty. Apple seems, in its PC business, to have accepted a lower rate of growth, still slightly ahead of the market, but that Macs will continue to be important and strong, but they're really a minor part of Apple's business. It will not do what would be necessary to resume double-digit growth, which would be to provide a significantly lower entry price for Macintosh PCs. It's pursuing iPhones and iPads as its avenue to growth. Do you want any of these? Okay. Thank you. So let's talk about the threat question mark of Chromebook. Chromebook is enjoying a considerable amount of success both in the education market and in the consumer market. For both groups, it offers not merely a low-price solution. It offers a simpler solution, rapid on, no viruses, the ability to move your entire environment to another device if there's a problem with this one. It gives simplicity. And as far as we can tell, the sales of Chromebooks are accelerating. We believe Chromebook is an exemplar of a new category, a thing we call lightweight keyboard devices. The other possible entrants, they haven't entered the field really, are an iPad, an Apple offering associated with an integrable keyboard, with a docking keyboard, some modifications to the OS, and the ability to offer a device that's useful for writing, that has a real keyboard, that separates into an iPad. The other entry could be the Windows RT device, a simpler device. The appeal of these devices is they have the simplicity and the freedom from what we might call hassle of a tablet, but they have a very important ingredient, and that is a keyboard. For many tasks, including many fun tasks, a keyboard is a very important asset. Searching effectively requires a keyboard, and that has driven the success of the Chromebook. In our recent research, we've discovered that tablets are used for a small number of specialized things. They're the preferred device for watching movies, but not for consuming videos, for example, because if you're searching for videos on YouTube, you want to be able to type into it. They're not a preferred device for online shopping because a keyboard is helpful there. So the PC is heavyweight. The Chromebook is lightweight. It has the ease of use, the instant on, the simplicity of a tablet, but it has that very important keyboard. And we think this is an important feature. Going forward, we think this kind of device, which can do a lot of PC work, although not all of it, has real potential in the commercial market. And we believe that without appropriate interventions by Microsoft, large enterprises may find themselves at a point where they're willing to consider giving Chromebooks to many of their users and PCs to their more knowledge worker users who need the power and flexibility of a PC. And that would be a significant problem for Microsoft. And that's the reason why there's a question mark here about the threat. There's a clear threat, unquestioned threat to Microsoft here. But for the vendors, a Chromebook is just another device. It may, in the long run, suffer the same commoditization and margin pressures that PCs have suffered, but it's still much the same kind of business for a device vendor. So let's move on to smartphones. In smartphones, we've seen a maturation in this very exciting category as we're now 6 years after the introduction of the first touchscreen smartphone. What we've seen is a slowing down of the visible changes in innovations. The vendors are still working very hard to make each one brighter, faster, bigger, more interesting with more differentiating hardware than the earlier ones, but still there's no question that the incremental change in the usefulness of the device is getting smaller and smaller. So the pressure to update your smartphone at the earliest possible time has diminished, and so you're seeing users hold on to their smartphones longer, waiting for the one they want, waiting for the opportunity, or replacing one that's been damaged, but not necessarily needing the newest one right away, which was the situation at an earlier time. One aspect of the maturity is there's been saturation at the very top of the market. The people who can afford the expense not only of the smartphone, but the very expensive data plan. So this leads to a replacement cycle that is still very advantageous to the vendors, because people tend to replace their smartphones relatively quickly, but they're no longer getting the growth rates they were getting from the conversion of buyers at the high end of the market from feature phones to smartphones. Most of them have made that conversion. We're seeing an evolution in differentiation in the form factors, a larger number of larger phones, of phones that are more specialized. This is inevitable as a market grows and matures. You can see it in automobiles. You can see it in almost any category of goods. And the fact that some people can use and like a larger phone and others want one that's more easily fits in their pockets is just inevitable. We believe that even Apple will move off of its one-size-fits-all approach in smartphones next year. Finally, with the saturation of the high end of the market and the saturation of certain geographies, we see a progression into the what would be called the emerging economies, into places where the penetration rate for smartphones is lower, and for there, price becomes very important. The growth is in the lower priced smartphones. It's one of the reasons that Samsung is able to keep selling a lot of smartphones, but it's also driving the growth of companies like.
Certainly. So one of the things that we're seeing is that companies like Apple and Samsung, the market leaders, the growth is really starting to come back down to earth as far as the annual gains, which in the case of Samsung were borderline, seemed like more representative of the growth rates of a startup, where they were shipping units in excess of 250% gains over a year-to-year basis. So now what we're starting to see, especially over in China and in other regions within APAC, is that companies like Huawei, Lenovo, Sony to some extent, and ZTE, with a broader range of more affordable devices, and even that concept of affordability really branches down into the sub $150, and in some cases with models from Huawei and ZTE, sub $100 devices, is really propelling the unit shipment growth. And to Ezra's point, what we're starting to see is that the revenue potential of the marketplace is not stagnating per se, but that the revenue share, or the amount of the total addressable market that will wind up producing the revenue, is really going to start to be dictated by some lower cost devices, and it's really going to have a ripple effect on the strategies of companies like Samsung and Apple that are used to competing and reaping most of the lion's share of the profits for the profits and revenues from the upper ends of the marketplace. The competition and the pool of competitors in the lower end is significantly makes the market significantly more crowded and a lot more challenging for a lot of the vendors in our benchmark.
Thank you, Jack. That
Sure.
was Jack Narcotta. What Apple has done with this is used its earlier models to provide a lower priced alternative. It's still considerably higher priced than the lower priced models from other vendors. And the thing that Apple has not announced is what it's going to do with a significant number of iPhones it's taking, it's paying for when people upgrade to a new iPhone. We believe that Apple will enter the refurbished market to provide an even lower priced full-fledged iPhone alternative for price-sensitive markets. Most of these are places where the subscription model of purchasing, the subsidized model, is no longer in operation, and buyers can actually see the device price more clearly. So one of the things that's happening in smartphones is an increased interest in biometrics in forms of identification. And Apple has had considerable success with the fingerprint scanner. Not a wonderfully secure device by itself, but adequately secure and adequately convenient. It serves not only to activate and open the device, but to validate the device for iTunes purchases, and therefore adds considerably both to the convenience of the device and the convenience of making purchases. So a net benefit for iTunes. Our understanding is that Samsung is working on an eye scanner with a similar kind of effect. The idea here is not to create a completely high-end secure solution by itself, but to create one that provides tolerable security with reasonable convenience and can be combined with a password to provide high security. Then we go on to the always-on features of the Moto X and the iPhone S. And the iPhone S, it's provided through a chip called the M7. So these devices are actually gathering data when they're off. They can be used to provide location and accelerometer data. They can be used to be sensitive to voice commands, and we think this is an area of continued innovation in smartphones. And then there are peripherals, that is to say, peripherals to the phone, and we've seen some experimentation by Samsung with a watch, and we think that's a likely location for these peripherals. We think that these are sources of added revenue, but not any of them earth-shaking or significantly market-moving. We think virtually all the phone platforms will have a way of dealing with a wrist-based accessory, and there may be others going forward. Finally, let's move on to the last category of devices, the tablets. Let's talk a little bit about what is a Windows 8 device, because we see a lot of projections about future PC sales and future tablet sales, and a lot of them, we believe, comes down to how do you categorize a Windows 8 device, which is really both. If Windows 8 devices are largely categorized as tablets, or those with separable screens are categorized as tablets, then I think you will see continued decline in PCs. But remember that those tablets will often be docked and become a PC. If you categorize anything that can be a PC as a PC, then I think you'll see a real flattening off of PC sales. What is true is that very few buyers who buy a full-size Windows 8 tablet will also buy a PC. So you either have 0% or 100% cannibalization there. It's a matter of counting them. Nevertheless, what we can say is the Windows 8 two-in-one device, whether it's actually a keyboard screen pair that stays connected or one that docks, or a tablet that is docked for a stationary PC, is a very successful two-in-one device. It does both of these things quite well. The Windows 8 tablets don't have the apps repertoire of the other two platforms, but for their basic tablet functionality, they're very satisfactory. And for users who really just want the one-handed web browsing, email reading, and checking of calendars and things, it's a fine solution that is also a full-fledged PC, no compromise PC. Google, in issuing the Nexus 7, did something interesting, which is that it raised the base price of this price-sensitive category and this price-oriented product. They packed an awful lot of new goodies in it to justify raising the price. With the first Nexus 7, we believe Google helped legitimize the Android tablet branded as Android, with running a bare-bones Android operating system. With the second Nexus 7, Google is repositioning the Android as not necessarily only for the lowest possible price category, but a good solid tablet in a lower price band from the iPad. It's still very much an iPad type device in the sense that it is used for what we call tablet-y things. It's used for web browsing, videos, music, browsing email, but not so much writing them. Users love these devices. They don't try to make them do the things they don't do well. They're not really PC substitutes. That's not true of Windows 8. And that's why we say that there's real differentiation. Basically, users say, do I need something that can be or do the tasks of a PC? If so, they go for a Windows 8. They then say, do I want a high-end, fully integrated, full-service solution, and do I not mind paying the extra dollars? In that case, they go for the Apple. Or do they say, I want a good cost-effective solution with a wide range of choices from a wide range of vendors, in which case they go for the Android. The Chromecast isn't only a tablet story. This is the device that Google brought out with the new Nexus 7, although it works with all platforms. It's a device to bring in the fourth screen, bring in the television screen in a very simple manner. And we believe it really will shake up the plans of most of the vendors for television integration. If that's set-side boxes, consoles, or smart TVs, the Chromecast kind of jumps in with a good enough solution at an attractive price, a cross-platform solution, and will disrupt the plans of the vendors in that space. With respect to Amazon, Amazon's continued pursuit of the Kindle Fire is somewhat surprising to us, because the Kindle and then the Kindle Fire were created in order to drive content sales, in order to drive first the ebook and then the video content sales from Amazon. But Amazon does as well selling that content onto other platforms, iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac, as it does selling them onto a product that it creates and sells. It creates itself and sells at a loss, which is the Kindle Fire. We believe there's no doubt that Amazon should continue to sell the Kindle Fire. We believe, however, that Amazon, both in its implementations and in its promotions, is neglecting to take the market it could take of the Kindle software platform on all those other platforms. And this is kind of falling in love with your own product, and we think it's a rare mistake by Amazon not to promote Kindle as the content distribution and content consumption platform across all device platforms. And finally, Apple has continued its positioning of the iPad as a high-end, high-resolution device. It's actually increased the price of the iPad, the top-end iPad Mini, to include its Retina screen, and reduced the price of the old iPad Mini, not as much as we had thought. This leaves iPad for Apple as a solid, profitable, premium product, but means it will not end the diminution of market share that iPad is suffering in the tablet market as a result of its premium price. Altogether, tablets, apart from the Windows 8, which is a PC as far as this is concerned, are a luxury item. Our long-term feeling about tablets is they will continue to be a desirable consumer electronics device, but not seen as a necessity for day-to-day functioning as the other two devices are. And so they are subject to style, price sensitivity, and things like that. It's not a really practical product. It serves some good purposes. The Windows 8 tablets, on the other hand, are a way of having a PC, which is pretty much a necessity that doubles with tablet manifestation. Finally, in conclusion, as I said, the pace of change is slowing. It's not stopping by any means, but it's not quite as hectic as it has been up until now. The next wave of change will be generated by these keyboard devices like the Chromebook. The gating factor on much greater growth in the smartphone market is a new structure of network pricing that allows users to get the benefits of a smartphone without the very high network costs, which shuts out a large part of the market. And finally, and we won't include this as part of the discussion, all of this very much changes the content picture. Who's making, consolidating, selling, and content, and how it's being sold are all changing very rapidly because of the changes in the device market. And that concludes our presentation.
Great, thanks, Ezra, and thanks to those of you who have sent through questions already. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if you have any questions for Ezra or Jack, please send them through the chat or the Q&A function now. The first question we have, guys, which approach do you think appeals to customers? Apple's approach to keeping desktop, laptop OS different from tablet OS versus Windows' approach of merging the two?
I think it comes down to what the customer wants. Where Windows is now, and it may change over time, but where Windows is now is it's the tablet for the worky kinds of things. So it does the tablet things that are relevant to getting the job done, to keeping communications going, to the practical applications of a tablet. It does those very well. The web browsing, keeping up with email, checking your calendar, and those sorts of things. It is so far not got a wealth of games, doesn't have a wealth of applications as content, because right now people browse applications as they browse books, music, videos, etc., as an interesting thing with which to pass time. And the Windows 8 platform isn't there. So if you want a tablet as an entertainment device, as a plaything, then clearly you want something that doesn't double as a heavy-duty workhorse, which is what OS X does. You want something that is basically a toy, you know, for whatever its practical purposes are. So what you've got with iOS is a very pleasant toy that does some practical things. What you have with Windows 8 is a heck of a tool that does some pleasant things.
Chuck, you want to weigh in?
Well, one of the things that it's been roughly about a year, just to kind of back up a little bit, that it's been roughly about a year since Apple put Craig Federighi and Joni Ive in the same room to work out the similarities or capitalize on the synergies between iOS and the various versions of OS X that have been released since then. And certainly while the latest version of OS X is a step forward towards making it more iOS-like, I think I certainly support Ezra's point that it really comes down to how the user is going to actually interact with the particular device at hand. And Apple is very keenly aware of not only the whys of the whys, W-H-Y-S, the whys of why the users are gravitating towards their devices, but also importantly the hows, and that the software for the time being in the realm of the Apple ecosystem is certainly going to remain separate, although much akin to the virtual OS and the applications provided by Chrome, by the Chrome OS from Google, is that we'll start to see some features begin to overlap into each other's ecosystems. So certainly iOS will potentially gain some access or some functionality that mirrors its OS X counterpart, especially given that the hardware is intended or fully intended by Apple to certainly interact with one another, and much in the same regard that OS X will continue to evolve and adapt some features from iOS from the mobile devices, and you know, with the primary driver behind that being continued adoption and a continued widening of the customer base for the iPhone and for the iPad.
Okay. Our next question. Do you have any ideas or suggestions of how PC vendors can address the problem of decreasing operating margin?
Yeah, yes, we do. We think that the lengthening PC life cycle is certainly a challenge for PC vendors. They're selling their devices less often, the total volume is down. But it's also an opportunity, which is that buyers, recognizing that they're going to keep their devices longer, are amenable to a number of different kinds of upsells. One is simply getting a better device. You recognize that you're keeping it longer. This has happened with automobiles. Automobiles are being kept longer than they ever have. They're also being bought with an eye to long life, and you can sell people this automobile will last, and you'll be happy having it for a long period of time because it's stronger, it's tougher, it's got all the features you're going to need, that sort of thing. Also, you can tailor service packages to long-term maintenance of the PC, to backup and restore, to tuning them so that they regain their youthful performance. Finally, the ultimate way of selling this kind of long-term service relationship is through a device-as-a-service model, which we believe has a long-term potential in the PC marketplace, where you're doing a combination of a long-term service plan with a lease, so that you are buying the continued availability of a fully functioning, backed-up, restorable PC for the duration of that time for a monthly fee. And we think that has a real potential not only to increase margins, but to create a much stronger relationship between the purchaser and the vendor.
Yeah, so we got a couple questions that just came in, you guys, that are from one person, so I'm going to ask them back to back. What's your opinion of the role of convertible PCs, the ones that flip and fold and have a full-size keyboard?
I think for some users it's a very good solution. The thing that makes the touch screen valuable even in what a device that is almost entirely used as a traditional PC, is that it becomes usable other than in the 2 feet on the floor, 2 hands on the keyboard, facing the PC on a desk or table position. It can be used standing up with the PC held in one hand and the finger used to control the device in the other. So that if you want a larger screen, if you want all the keyboard travel and the power and the other things that are packed into a full-size PC, getting a convertible allows you to take that device, twist it or bend it over backwards or whatever it does in order to put the screen on top and carry it and refer to it while standing or even walking. That adds to your scope. It adds to your opportunities to leverage the information, leverage the connectivity embedded in the device.
Okay. Do you want to weigh in, Jack? You good?
Feel good, thanks.
So the follow-up question was, what services, quote unquote, would you deem most important in the future of the business computer user?
I think that the services are of 2 types. There's the types that are delivered automatically by servers and the types that are delivered by people. And clearly the ability to resume work with all your data and your device in the fully restored state as soon as possible is a critical service. So if you wanted to have a long-term service contract that basically says this device will be there for you, for the duration of this time and will be replaced very rapidly with a working version if there's any problem, you'd want a continuous backup and the ability to drop ship a restored device on very short order, so you could just pick up the new one and start working in and ship the old one back to the vendor and have it returned to the refurb pool or whatever. I think that would be a critical feature. Secondarily, you need someone who can answer the phone and solve your problems and answer your questions and not leave you with a sense that there's something you don't know how to do, there's some problem you're trying to solve that can't be solved. We've done research on Apple's very significant success in selling AppleCare, which is primarily a break-fix, repair kind of service. But in fact, the buying is largely motivated by the continued availability of Apple's very high-end telephone support. Basically, Apple users are willing to pay a considerable premium for the assurance that no matter what problem they're having, there'll be somebody to help them solve it.
Okay. We had another question come through. Do you think if an Android tablet added physical keyboards and robust office productivity apps at low price points, it could begin to replace Windows PCs?
I think it's possible. I think you probably need to adapt the Android operating system a certain amount, but it looks like Google is really using the Chrome OS more as that kind of device. It certainly allows you to do anything you want with Android, but I think that the more successful device of that type is likely to be the Chromebook.
Okay, we have 2 more questions, so I know we're going to go over a little bit, but that's okay. So the next question, guys, what do you see as the longer-term trends in smartphones?
I think that the gaining factor with the long-term growth of smartphones is finding a different way of pricing or paying for network connectivity, wireless connectivity. And I think that's the reason that Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook created a consortium to basically look at that problem, a problem that Google has called the next 5 billion. Both Google and Facebook have experimented with subsidizing connectivity. That combined with bandwidth conservative servers, bandwidth conservative applications, and bandwidth conservative devices, I think could lead to great additional growth of smartphones in a much more price-sensitive market than they've been in so far.
Okay. Let's follow up. How about tablets? What is the long-term outlook? What is the cannibalization story?
With tablets, I think the thing to look at with tablets, again, apart from Windows 8, which is a very different kind of device, is it's a consumer electronics I don't want to minimize it by calling it a toy, but it is basically a toy. It's bought for pleasure. It's bought for convenience. It's bought because people like them, and they do like them very much. That means that it continues to be such a device, and those with enough surplus income to buy themselves something they don't really need but would like will buy them at all the various price points. But it doesn't become the critical device that the other two devices are.
Okay, it looks like it doesn't have any additional questions in queue, but I'm going to leave the chat function open for another couple minutes in case anybody has any last-minute questions. So with that, I'd like to wrap up the conversation. So I want to thank both Jack and Ezra for their time today, as well as thank everyone for joining us for this conversation. As I mentioned, I was going to share all the social media links with you. So I'd like to encourage you to follow both Ezra and TBR on Twitter to join the conversation about what's happening in the devices market, as well as join us on SlideShare and YouTube to get access to this content as well as other content in the devices space. I'd like to thank you guys all for attending today. On your way out of the webinar, we are running a short survey. Did you find value in the presentation? How good was the presenter? And if there are any other open-ended comments you'd like to share with us, if there's other topics or areas you'd like us to focus more on in our research, that would be helpful. We are looking at this feedback quarter to quarter to improve our presentations, so any feedback you give us would be greatly appreciated. As I mentioned, I'm going to leave the chat function open for another few minutes in case there's any last-minute questions or any requests for follow-up conversations with the analyst directly. And if we don't hear from you now, we'll talk to you guys all again next quarter. Are there any other webinars that we're doing that would be of interest to folks coming up?
I don't think we've announced any, but we will be doing.
Okay, so keep your eyes peeled for additional webinars on more additional relevant topics, and we'll look forward to the next Devices Benchmark webinar next quarter. So thanks, everyone. It's early happy holidays, but we'll see you guys all in January.
Thank you very much.